Hello, my name is Natasha McKeever. I am a partner and head of the contentious probate team at Burdon Solicitors. I first of all hope you and all of your families and colleagues are safe and well in what is obviously a very, very difficult time, challenging time for everyone, both individually and work-wise. Burdon, we've decided to put together some short webinars, about 15 minutes long, looking at different areas of the law and how they have been affected because of COVID-19. So hopefully it's a quick snapshot of a particular area to give you some insider knowledge, keep you up to date, but without taking too much of your time up. So today I'm going to start the short webinar series on the changes and challenges that the wills industry is facing at the moment, and then we'll have further seminars from my colleagues dealing with employment, properties, that's residential and commercial property, and the commercial litigation team. If you would like any other areas that we've not covered to be covered, please feel free to email, let us know. All of the email addresses can be found on the Burdon website, but also an ILM corporate partner, so you can find our details via the ILM website. Okay, so I'm going to kick off dealing with wills. So I'll just give you an overview of what I will look at today. So I said it's probably going to be about a 15-minute webinar, just me talking. I'm going to look at what we are seeing and the new trends in will making, the issues will writers are facing in the current climate because of COVID-19, how that all affects charities, and hopefully some tips on how you could potentially increase your donations and legacies at this time, which obviously will be greatly received. So starting with the trends in will writing since the outbreak of COVID-19, there's been a massive increase in demand for wills. So that's people making wills for the first time, but also updating their wills. I guess that's probably to be expected in the current climate. People are more concerned about their own mortality, so want to get everything in order in case something were to happen. So we've seen a 70% jump in wills. As I said, we found that most of the people making or updating wills are of the older generation, so at least 50 and over, but young people are making wills for the first time as well. There's also been a massive increase in NHS staff. I read a statistic this week to say that there's 12 times more medical staff making wills now than there were in December 2019, which again, I'm sure that's to do with COVID-19 and the worries that medical staff are under. So that's where we are in terms of there's been a massive influx of wills. Turning now to look at the issues facing will writers in the current climate, so that's both solicitors and will writers. The first issue is confirming the testator's identity. Normally that would be done via a face-to-face meeting. The client testator would bring their passport, driving licence, and you could easily determine that they are who they said they were to prevent any fraudulent wills happening. Obviously that's not one-to-one meetings with social distancing rules aren't able to be complied with, but it's quite easy to get around this. It's just we have been asking clients to just show us their video passports or driving license, and we can confirm their identity that way. I think that's probably the most sensible approach on that front. The next two issues I'm going to talk about are much more difficult, and I think post-COVID-19, once this is all settled, I can see a potential influx for will challenges because of the way that wills have been drafted around COVID-19 situations. So the two main areas I think are causing most concern and have the potential to go on to cause will disputes in the future are whether the testator may have been under undue influence, and also whether or not the testator lacked mental capacity to make the will. Now, ordinarily, undue influence is something that you would try and eradicate by the solicitor or will writer meeting the testator, the client, face to face, seeing them alone, making sure that if they're a vulnerable or elderly person in particular, that nobody's in the room when will instructions have been given. That's not possible at the moment. You can't meet a client face to face. So instead you're having to deal with telephone or video instructions. The guidance from the SRA and Law Society is that you should try to have a video call with the client, and that can be done on a mobile phone, via FaceTime or Zoom or Skype. There's so many different options now for video calls. And if possible, ask them to shut the door of the room that they're in and scan the room with the video, just to make sure there's nobody in the room. Now, obviously with elderly people, they might not be as used to using that kind of technology, so that could prove more problematic. But if they do have somebody younger in the house with them, the person that's potentially unduly influencing, you'd like to think that they would have the video recording device on their phone and could pass that information and technology over to their elderly relative. So I do think that where possible, videos in that way should be carried out, and attendance notes kept by the solicitor and the will writer to say that they did those checks and everything was worked out. Confirming lack of mental capacity. This again has its own issues. Normally you would meet one-to-one. If you felt as a solicitor or will writer that the person making the will has potential issues with lack of mental capacity to make the will, or you're concerned about a later challenge given their age, you would want to get a mental capacity check report done either by a GP or a specialised psychiatrist. Again, this is an issue because you can't meet the client face to face to have that interaction to gauge whether or not you feel like they're okay. And secondly, where you do need a GP or a psychiatrist report, they're much more difficult to come into get at the moment, just because of the ability of doctors to A, meet people face to face, and B, they're very busy. GPs and doctors are probably busy dealing with other situations. This is definitely a challenging area. I have heard of at least one company that have that do mental capacity reports, and they are offering those via video link, which seem to be working well. And certainly, if there is a real concern that somebody lacks capacity, that would definitely be a viable option, and one that could potentially save the will dispute later on. Fourth issue, which is causing a lot of debate about, is the execution of wills. So there has been talk of relaxing of the rules on execution and witnessing of wills, but as of yet there has been no legislative changes. At the moment, Section 9 of the Wills Act still applies. So a will, in order to be valid, must be in writing, signed by the testator, or by another person at the testator's request, and it needs to be witnessed by two people who witness the testator signing the will, and then they also sign the will as well. Again, this would usually be carried out in a solicitor's office. The solicitor would normally be the first witness to the will, the person that drafted the will for the testator, and the second person is normally a member of staff in the solicitor's office. So there's no question mark as to whether or not the will has been executed correctly. Clearly, most offices now are closed, and with social distancing regulations, you're not allowed to meet people face to face. That means that solicitors and will writers are having to rely on the client to follow the witnessing and execution and witnessing rules to the T, and they have to make sure that they give them very, very clear guidance as to how they should sign and witness their will. And that's one issue, making sure that they have the instructions and that they're clear and proper and that they know what they're doing. But then the second issue is obviously trying to find somebody to witness the will, or two people to witness the will, because at the moment we still need two witnesses. We're not allowed to go within 2 meters of each other. The guidance is from the Law Society and the Solicitors Regulation Authority that you can ask neighbours to witness the will, keep within 2 meters of each other, and if possible to try and do that in the open air, so on a driveway or out on the road even, so that you're not in a confined space with each other, because you shouldn't really be entering each other's homes. The SRA have also, or the Law Society rather, have also said that where possible, this client should record the execution of the will, so video record them signing the will and the witnesses, to try and fend off any future disputes about the will. And once COVID-19 restrictions have been lifted, where it's needed, that you consider having the will re-executed just to make sure that it is completely compliant with the Section 9 of the Wills Act. So you can see in itself there's definitely going to be a number, I would imagine, of claims in this area where wills haven't been executed in accordance with Section 9 of the Wills Act, and there will be later disputes in that particular area. The final issue that we're finding that's causing most issue is complying with all of these regulations in a timely manner. So you move too soon, you risk falling foul of one of the rules. So for example, assuming that somebody has mental capacity when they don't, potentially, that's fall foul and you're negligent there, and the will could be invalid or challenged. Or moving too slowly and the testator doesn't make it past the date of when their will was signed, so they pass away before their will has been finalised and sent to them for execution. That will in itself lead to potential claims by disappointed beneficiaries for negligence in not drafting the will quickly enough. So you can see how the contentious probate arena potentially is going to increase after COVID-19, because there's a whole host of issues that the social distancing and the number of increased people making wills at the same time is having on the industry, on the will writing industry. I wrote a blog last week, it's on the Burdon website and the blog section, just setting out top 5 negligence issues of will writing, and many of these issues are in that, so if you have time, it might be worth having a read of that. Okay, so how does this all affect charities? And what impact will it have on you? Well, as I said, it's going to increase will claims, which can impact on your what you get in your legacies, what you're left with. So that in itself will impact the charity industry. The difficulty with new wills being drafted at this time is the same issue that charities always have. So if a testator leaves something to you in their will, and then later on a later will's made, and you're not in that will, and that will may have been made via undue influence, or the person that made the will lacks mental capacity, or it's a fraudulent will, so where the identity's not been checked, etc. As a charity, it's unlikely that you will know about the previous will, because you're not connected to that person, you won't even know that they've passed away. So charities in this area are always faced with a difficult scenario where they're literally reliant on tip-offs from family members, friends, neighbours, to alert them that somebody who they believe would have left something to the charity in their will and passed away, and that they may have, there's a potential will that's not valid, and the charity may have a claim under a previous will. Practically, I think what I would try to do, other than relying on tip-offs, is that potentially as these wills in this area, so wills dated from early March to whenever COVID-19 restrictions are relaxed, probably in the next few months, when you are left a legacy in a will made in that period, whether you find out about it in a year, 5 years, 10 years from now, I think it potentially could be worth, especially if it's a small legacy, it could potentially be worth looking back at a previous will, asking what the previous will said to see whether or not your charity would have been left a bigger donation, bigger legacy in the previous will, and then just double checking that you're happy by making some investigations that later will, that last will, was made correctly, and that the testator wasn't under any undue influence or any other issues to restrict the amount of the gift that they left to the charity. I say that because at the moment, obviously, lots of elderly and vulnerable people, are potentially living with relatives who may be more inclined to ask questions around their wills, potentially influence them to change their will. So I think it's important to just keep a check on the periods from early March to the next few months. And just if you're left any legacies under wills made in that period, you might just want to make a little bit more of a check on those. I also think that this, one other way that charities will be hit is that there will be delays on legacies being paid. So there'll be delays on grants of probate being taken out. Firstly, because it might not be possible to enter the deceased home to get the original will, or if the original will is with a will bank, a solicitor's will bank, the solicitor's office may be closed and you can't get access to that for a while, for a few weeks. Secondly, there's going to be a delay in the application for probate, just because property valuations, getting information from the bank, everything's slowed down slightly. So I think there'll probably be at least a few month delay in obtaining grants of probate, which will then have a knock-on effect on charities' returns on their legacy and receiving the legacies. I tried to think of some ways that you could potentially look to increase donations and legacies at this time. Obviously, all charities have had a massive impact in terms of the income that they receive. Carl Wilding, Chief Executive of NCVO, said a couple of weeks ago that over the next 12 weeks, charities would lose £4 billion in income. Up until recently, just the 8th of April, the Chancellor hadn't made any provisions at all for charities in the budgets. That has changed. As of 8th of April now, £750 million is going to be made available to charities. That's brilliant, but obviously it falls very much short of the £4 billion that's going to potentially be lost. And also that £750 million is going to frontline charities, so hospices, charities that are dealing with medical care, etc. So there's going to be so many charities that are going to be missed. So now more than ever, charities need to try and think and be innovative in the way that they are increasing their income. So that's via donations and legacies, and I'm sure that's something that you're all doing at the moment on a daily basis. But just a couple of ideas that might help and things to think about. So obviously at the moment, given the massive increase in wills that are being generated, so a 70% increase on wills at least, I think it's important, if you have an advertising campaign, and I totally appreciate that many of you won't have had that even before now, and those of you that had that may not be able to access that advertising fund at the moment. But if you have got access to any advertising funds, I think it's important to look at using that advertising campaign to try and promote leaving legacies to you in their wills, because people are making wills at the moment, as well as ongoing donations that you need day to day. If you don't have the advertising campaign money there, which I'm sure many of you don't, there are other ways. So it's reaching out to your donors, whether that's by email, telephone, letters, depending how you normally would reach out to your donors, and just reminding them that it's not only donations that you need on a day-to-day basis, but to try and remember your charity in their will. Because now they are people that may not have made wills, might be making them for the first time, and it's just reminding them that they can leave a gift to the charity in their will, and the benefits of doing that, tax benefits, etc. Something else I think is often left and forgotten about is catastrophe clauses in wills. So catastrophe clauses come into play where if somebody makes a will and, God forbid, their family or whoever they've named in their will, the individuals named in the will, predeceased or died at the same time as them, if there isn't a catastrophe clause, their estate will fall under the rules of intestacy, so potentially distant relatives that they wouldn't want to inherit, or if there's no distant relatives, falls to the Crown. I think that's often overlooked by solicitors and will writers, and somewhere where I think most people, if they had that option, would put a catastrophe clause in to leave their estate ultimately to a charity if their closest people that they want to inherit aren't able to. I think if you can get that subtly across to donors when you're writing to them or calling or emailing to say, something that you may not be aware of, but this could be useful to you and to charities, that ultimately your estate will go to somebody worthwhile and where you want it to go to. The other tip, which is completely unrelated to wills and probate, but just something to bear in mind, and I wasn't aware of until recently, is that furloughed employees are allowed to volunteer to work for charities. Unfortunately, as far as I'm aware, that is not furloughed employees of that charity. So you can't be furloughed by your charity employer and then go back to work volunteering. But you could go to a different charity and work for a different charity. or you've probably got a number of donors who regularly donate, supporters of your charities who are sat at home on furlough leave, which is, for those of you that aren't aware, but I'm sure everyone is at the moment, furlough is that you are put on, so you can't work for your employer, but the government will pay 80%, up to £2,500 or 80% of your wages. There's many employees that I know who are frustrated that they are unable to work and do anything at the moment, and would welcome the opportunity to be able to volunteer for charities. So if you are struggling because you've had to furlough members of staff and you need extra resources, it's worth reaching out to your donors and supporters, if any of them are on furlough, if they want to volunteer to help the charity at the moment. And that would be something that you would be very much appreciative of, and I think that would work both ways. So that's it. I've gone through what we're facing, challenges wills writers and solicitors are facing at the moment, and hopefully giving you a few tips that you can take back to base, and hopefully potentially increase your legacies and donations over the next few weeks, months. If you have any questions, whether it's about what I've spoken about today or anything else that you think you might need some help with, please feel free to contact me. Again, it's Natasha McKeever at Burdon. Myself or one of my colleagues will be able to help. And you can find all of my contact details on the Burdon website, but also on the ILM website under the Corporate Partners head. So please all stay safe, good luck, and look forward to seeing all of you, most of you, all of you soon. Thank you.